What is up, everybody? Welcome into this live post-game show. The season is over edition of the Pack-A-Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm stalling because I don't even know what I really want to say. Usually I come in and give you my hot take, my view, my opinion on exactly what happened. And I don't know that I have anything super exciting for you guys. A complete shit game. One that they clearly, decidedly did not deserve to win in any capacity. I hate how that game started for a billion different reasons. I hate the fact that you have a situation where Keyshawn Nixon is fumbling the football. I hate that it looked helmet to helmet. I do know that Keyshawn kind of lowers his head a little bit as well. Not sure if that went into it, but usually when you get a helmet to helmet like that, you sometimes get a call on that. I absolutely hate that it looked like he recovered it, but you fumbled and you started the game with that. And then the Eagles immediately scored a touchdown. And we talked about in the pregame show and really kind of all week long of we would know pretty early in this game of what Packers team was showing up to the fight in this one. And we got our answer pretty early. I mean, it was certainly not completely over, and Green Bay's defense did a pretty fantastic job of keeping them in this game and making it close. The fact that it was 10-0 at halftime. I mean, it had no right to be 10-0 at halftime. That had every right to be something of a much bigger blowout much earlier in the game. And Green Bay's defense kind of kept hanging around outside of a really brutal play by Carrington Valentine on Dallas Goedert. I mean, Philly's going to get some points, right? Like you're not going to hold them to a shutout or anything like that. So outside of that, I thought Green Bay's defense really did a nice job in this game, again, to kind of keep it close, to keep it competitive, certainly more close and competitive than it had any right being based on how the offense and special teams played in this game. But again, you sort of knew right from the onset of exactly what type of game this felt like and was going to be. And they never really changed the narrative on that in any way. But I cannot stand how that started. I don't think this is not one of those games where you go back and be like, man, if Green Bay just, or if they just called Green Bay down and Keyshawn Nixon got the ball to start the game, like they deserve to win this game. Green Bay had no deserve to win this game whatsoever. They played like crap throughout the entirety of this game. They were the worst team. They did not play to win. They were not prepared to win. And there's nothing that you can look at in this game, again, outside of a fairly impressive day from the defense to say, yeah, that team got screwed over. They may have got screwed over at moments in that game. No question about it. But I don't know that anyone could look you in the eye and say that the better team didn't win that game, because they very clearly did. And it is a massively disappointing end to the season on a 3-game losing streak. Nothing went Green Bay's way. And that goes from penalties to some bizarre calls early in this game to the way that Green Bay played, and just handling their own side of things, to the multitude of injuries. I've never quite seen anything like that from an injury standpoint, where it just everyone got hurt. And for an offensive line that was able to pretty much stay together through the entirety of the year, we got to learn very quickly just how important somebody like Elton Jenkins is actually to that team. It was a very strange choice to go with Travis Glover to begin with. Kadeem Telford has basically been in that spot all season long, and Glover comes in and performs wretchedly, for lack of a better term. And then it's not like Telford came in and like just tore it up, but at least provided some balance up until that point. But that was a nightmare for the offense. Then with already Christian Watson missing, Romeo Doubs goes down, then Jaden Reed goes down. The injury, and then of course all the defensive injuries. There's too many to almost keep track of. I feel awful for Josh Myers at the end of this game. Obviously not like he was having his best game by any means, or certainly had a rough second half of the season. But that dude's 3 minutes away from free agency, and probably played at about a similar level that John Runyon Jr. did last year when he got about a 3-year, $30 million contract. And if that's something serious, that goes from like a 3-year, $30 million contract to him probably not getting any long-term contract in the offseason, and then probably having to take something small either midway or, through next year, the following year. Like, brutal for him if that's serious. Just everything was a storm of shit from basically beginning to end in this one. Kudos to Josh Jacobs, who I also think got hurt and got taken out of the game due to injury. I mean, very clearly. He was effing awesome in this game. I mean, absolutely awesome. Outside of the fumble, that was close. I don't know if it looked like he was probably down. It was a very bang play. Thankfully, it was recovered either way. But outside of that, I mean, he gave everything he could to that performance. Again, I thought Jeff Hafley really good in this game and everything that he called. Again, even the touchdown to Goddard, like he's got a guy in place to make that tackle and just does not make that tackle. So I don't even need to look at him yet. I hear and I feel and I see all of your frustrations and everything that you're pissed off about. You have pretty much every right to be pissed off about as a fan. The team wasn't particularly ready, prepared. They looked tight once again coming into a big game. They once again go down double digits in a big game. They don't win a big game all year. They go 1-5 in the division. They go 0-1 in the playoffs. And that's the story of this team. Now, progress is not always linear. This is not super uncommon for a young team to make a playoff push one year and then, they make the playoffs, but maybe take a step back the next year. I don't think this is a catastrophic season. I don't think we need to re-question everything. I don't think we need to tear everything down to scratch and rebuild it back up. I don't think there's anything like that. But I think that there's going to have to be some self-reflection from this Packers team as to what their DNA is, what their philosophy is, what their what they can sort of hold their hat on that they are going to be able to win with, what their identity is as a team. Those are the things that they're going to have to legitimately kind of answer going into next season and have some better answers to, again, who they are and what they can do in big games, because it clearly was not good enough through the entirety of this season. I asked the question to a variety of different people on the podcast and on the radio show over this past week. And thank you for all the super chats. I promise you, I will get to every last super chat. And I will get to as many questions as we can throughout the course of this. I promise you all of that. I don't even know what I was saying anymore, but yeah, it's just a massively disappointing season. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. But yeah, again, I don't think they need to completely tear it down. Progress isn't linear. I think they have a lot of things that they can still, kind of build up with this team. But they're going to have to answer those questions as to, again, what their identity is as a franchise and how they're going to win big games. Oh, I was saying, I asked a variety of different people this past week, if Green Bay lost this game, would the season be a disappointment? And I said, yes. It would be a disappointment. Actually, I think I said, would it be a failure was my actual question. Would it be a failure? Failure is a very harsh word. I know Giannis would certainly not agree that this was a failure. He always talks about there's steps to it. To me, it is closer to a failure. It is absolutely a disappointment. I think there are some things that went in the right direction. I think clearly the defense is in a massively better spot than they were under Joe Barry and where they were a season ago. I think it's very much trending in the right direction defensively. I think that is a very good sign. I think some young players stepped up. I think Sean Ryan took a pretty significant step this season. I think although he had that very rough play in this game, I think Carrington Valentine took a step. I think there have been a couple other. Tucker Kraft took another step in the right direction. I think Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs were massive free agent signings and are going to be a huge part of this team moving forward. This was not a completely lost season. This was not a complete epic failure on all accounts, but it is absolutely a disappointment and absolutely a step backwards, in my opinion. And as far as the questions on Matt LaFleur, I thought this 3-game-ish streak was some of the worst of LaFleur that I have seen. I still think it's crazy to think that there's any sort of hot seat for Matt LaFleur or anything like. I mean, he's certainly not getting fired. I can guarantee you that. So, however hot you think the seat is, it's not hot enough to even have a discussion as to whether he's going anywhere or not. That will quite literally not happen in any way, shape, or form. How spicy it should be going into next season, there's more question of it now. I still think let's give this a hot second to see how this team starts next year. I still think his tenure as a whole has been a pretty resounding success, but you are judged on how you coach in big games. And this was not a great year for Matt LaFleur in how he has coached in big games. And there are some things that you can very clearly point to, from game management to decision-making to time management to how the team has come out in big games, that are fair things to question. Again, I think that question is within the realm of how does he get better, not and how quickly do you fire him? I think, again, that is a mostly ridiculous premise, but I do think there are legitimate questions as to what is the ceiling for this offense, for this team, for Matt LaFleur as a head coach, et cetera. I think those are fair questions to have. And I think some of the frustration and disappointment that is there is warranted, clearly. As far as Jordan Love and the questions on Jordan Love, I think that there are going to be now a stream of questions that are going to open up as to who's the real Jordan Love. We have 2 seasons. We have a season last year that had a first half that was pretty nondescript, to the point where Brian Gutekunst at the trade deadline was saying this is going to be a big second half for Jordan to prove that he can be the guy. And then Jordan in the second half of the season goes on an all-time heater. And I think somebody posted in the chat, is this like just Linsanity 2.0? He was unbelievable through the second half of that season, through the Cowboy game, and then had a little bit more of a come to earth against the 49ers in that final. Comes out this season. The Philly game is a little bit back and forth, a couple interceptions. I think Musgrave could have probably helped him out on that pick a little bit. Gets hurt, then is missing for some games, clearly is not himself through the remainder of the first half of the season. I don't think that was a clear indicator of who Jordan was as a QB. Comes back, goes on a bit of a heater, as they kind of showed on the game today in that middle stretch of the season, played some really good football. And then at the end of this season, I don't know how much the elbow was today an issue. It certainly seemed like the MCL and groin were behind him up until that point. But at the end of the season, goes on sort of a cold streak more akin to where he was at the beginning of 2023. If you were to put together the beginning of 2023, the first half of 2023 and the end of 2024, you would be like, that's a pretty average quarterback. There's nothing really there, right? If you were to put together the end of 2023 with that middle stretch of 2024 where he was playing some pretty damn good football, you'd say that looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Which one that is, how much injuries played a part, how much a lack of, cohesiveness on offense, meaning they just couldn't seem to get off of coverage in the second half of the year. The play calling was a little bit iffy at times. It never felt like they had an identity on offense really throughout the season, but especially in the second half. Those are questions that are going to have to get answered. Was Jordan good enough at the end of this year? He was not. He was not good enough. That overall performance, I would say for the most part on the season as a whole, was of a pretty middling quarterback. How much of that, again, is year 2, defense is starting to figure it out, him even needing to take that next evolution, him having, again, no rhythm and consistency through the course of the season? Those are fair questions as well. Is this just who he is from an accuracy and fading away, throwing off his back foot and those inconsistencies standpoint? Maybe. And that's going to be a major question moving forward. This will be a big offseason and a big 2025 and beyond, and 2025, 2026 season for Jordan Love. It's going to be a big one for Matt LaFleur, and it's going to be a big one for this Packers team as a whole. If you're looking for positives, for good signs, you're the youngest team in the league. As mentioned, progress is not always linear. The defense took a step. There's a lot of young talent on this team. Edgerrin Cooper looks like the real deal. As I mentioned, Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney were massive signings. There are some positives there, but a lot of these young guys are going to need to take a step. Goody's going to have to do his best to take another swing and hopefully hit another home run or 2 in free agency. And it is time to start drafting players that I will give very much credit. It looks like Evan Williams and Edgerrin Cooper are studs, like absolute studs, especially Cooper, but like especially first round picks. If you want a team that's going to be great, you can't really have a stretch of first round picks that includes Eric Stokes, what you got out of LVN so far. It's tough to say anything on Jordan Morgan because he barely got to play in large part due to injury. Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt, you need bigger impact and bigger ROI on your first round picks than that. So this is not to me, death to the franchise, stick a stake in it, burn it all down, start it up from scratch. Hopefully you can have something rise from the ashes. This is nothing like that. But do I think that Goody needs to be a little bit better when it comes to, again, some of his first round draft picks and things like that? Hell yeah. Do I think that Jordan needs to be better with his decision-making and accuracy? Hell yeah. And fundamentals? Hell yeah. Do I think that Matt needs to be better on how, having the pulse of the team, getting him ready for big games making sure that he's putting them in the position to succeed, getting better play calls in, making better decisions on fourth down, when to go for it, when to not go for it, field goal, non-field goal, 2-point conversion, non-2-point conversion, those sort of things, when to challenge, when not to challenge. Hell yeah. Do I think this offense took a pretty significant step back, especially at the end of the season, and is going to need to find its footing once again? Hell yeah. There's some cleanup on aisle 1265 that needs to get done. I personally do not believe that any of that cleanup involves having to fire anyone in the front office, fire anyone in the coaching staff. Yeah, you could look at maybe the defensive line and say that they, underachieved quite a bit. And if that was a decision that Matt thought as well, okay. I think you can ask some fair questions of the Rich Bisaccia era so far. I think that is a fair thing to ask at this point in year 3. I don't think that you need to go quarterback shopping. I don't think Malik Willis is the answer. I think we can ask fair questions and have a fair understanding that some changes need to get made. Some things need to be done better, that there needs to be a reflection on this team without going off the deep end and saying, tear it all down, nuke it. It's a lost cause. I don't believe that. I wholeheartedly, sincerely do not believe that. But if you do believe that, today would be a hell of a piece of evidence in your file if we were going to a debate and you wanted to point to this game and say, look at all the shitty stuff in this game as evidence 1A, you would certainly be right to do so, because today was not a particularly strong performance from pretty much anyone, again, outside of, I think, Jeff Hafley, Josh Jacobs. I'm sure on tape there will be a couple other players that stand out, but just not enough. Not enough. There's Randy right away with the first members chat here. So is it just a Linsanity run for Love? We'll find out. Time will tell. Not there yet, but there's a fair question to be asked as to who is the real Jordan Love. We've seen some really good stuff from Jordan Love. We've seen some pretty average stuff from Jordan Love. I don't think there's any world in which he's a bad quarterback, but the peak of his powers and how high of a ceiling and how good of a, can he be consistently a top 10, top 12, top whatever quarterback? Those are fair questions to ask at this point. And it's going to be up to Jordan to answer those questions in 2025 and beyond. I feel relief. The 2024 Green Bay Packers were frustrating to watch from the first step of the season up through the end of this game. On to next year. As always, thanks for all you do, Andy. You're the best. Steelyfield37. I really appreciate that. Appreciate the kind words. I know that this is a frustrating moment for everyone that is a fan of the Green Bay Packers, that wanted more for this team, that wanted to see a better step, a more significant step for this team, and take a step forward in 2024. I know everyone's frustrated, but Steely Phil, I appreciate the kind words. I'll promise I will bring my A game all throughout the offseason, going through free agency, the draft, breaking down what went wrong, tape review, film review, all of that stuff. We'll get started on the postmortem right away, and we'll start looking ahead and seeing what this team can do to build an even better team in 2025 and beyond. But it definitely a frustrating course of the season. Never really felt on track at any point. Never really felt on track at any point. Even when they were winning games, it just felt a degree or two off. Felt like there's something more there, and they could never quite grasp it at any point. And even more frustrating that not only could they not get to that point or grasp it, it felt like it got pretty significantly worse at the end of the season in their final 3 games. Why does Matt LaFleur hate under center play action? Randy, I absolutely hate how Green Bay came out in this game offensively. I'll go back and watch it more clearly, and we'll get a better feel for it. I do not, for the life of me, unless there was an injury situation with Jordan and somehow his elbow didn't feel comfortable under center, but it didn't seem like was the case because they used more under center in the second half. I could not stand for the life of me all the shotgun stuff in the first half. Blew my mind. And then not even to get into some of the spinner stuff that's been super successful for them on offense. And it just, I don't know what the plan was. I really don't know what the plan was. And it was so frustrating again later to see the under center stuff featuring Josh Jacobs in the short passing game really working at a pretty solid level in the second half when they needed to go there, outside of the times when they were shooting themselves in the damn foot again with penalties and got themselves in a lot of disadvantageous situations due to that. But when they could actually stay on schedule and go under center and run the football and use the short passing game, I mean, where was the bootleg and the, that sort of thing all season long? Where were the 3-layer throws, where you've got short, intermediate, and deep, rolling and you could layer it? Where just saw none of that. Really, really felt lacking in creativity And it very much felt this entire season. We talked about a lot in 2023 how in the first half of that season, it felt like Matt didn't quite trust Jordan in the offense and wanted to kind of handcuff it to him and just be like, we're going to take this really easy and we're going to run, a lot of screens and a lot of dump offs, and we're not going to really trust anything. And then it was kind of around the Steelers game in 2023 that it felt like Matt kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and uncuffed it and said, F it, let's go. We're going to ball. And the offense kind of took off and they're like, we're just going to go out and play and attack this thing. It felt like this went back to early 2023 where he had no faith or trust and was just trying to almost like micromanage it to a very large degree. And it just felt stifling. It felt really, really stifling. I don't know what that game plan was in the first half. It was atrocious. It was absolutely atrocious. Vex, you're lying to yourself if you think J Love is good enough. Bad ball placement, multiple missed interceptions, just putrid. He certainly was not good enough in this game. Again, I don't think that for the most part, this season was a great indicator for Jordan as a whole, when it came to the play calling, the offense, and just the injuries that he battled through and went through. But is it fair to question it? Is it fair to say, like, who is the real Jordan Love? It's absolutely fair at this point. He's still a young quarterback, still second year as a starter. We've seen quarterbacks a lot of times take that step back in year two. Defenses figure it out a little bit more. They have a counter to what you did the previous year, and then you've got to find a counter to that. And a lot of times it's harder than it seems. And we certainly saw that. And again, Jordan battled through a litany of injuries through the course of this year. Maybe that affected him a bunch. Maybe it didn't affect him at all. Maybe it was just Jordan not playing well. That could be the case. Maybe it affected him to a great extent. It's tough to say. Like I said, I think those are all going to be fair questions going into 2025, 2026 as to who is the real Jordan Love. Again, I think you put his top 17 games together, man, that looks like a unbelievable season. You put his bottom 17 games together, looks pretty mediocre at best. And maybe that's just who he is. Streaky QB. When he's hot, looks really good. When he's not, looks very average and middling. And that's who he's going to be as a QB. And if so, Green Bay is going to have to put a hell of a team around him to make sure that they're mitigating for whatever deficiencies that he has as a QB. And that could be the case. Still hopeful. I'll just put it that way. Still hopeful. Not ready to give up on Jordan Love. Again, progress for the team, progress for Jordan. These things aren't always linear. And again, defense is kind of figuring out a quarterback in year two and making them evolve and change and, kind of go through the ringer and figure things out on the back end of it. Those are very common things. We saw it with CJ Stroud to a very major extent this year. Not uncommon. Now the question is, can you take a step forward off of this? Can you even be better moving forward? And if not, well, then yeah, it's going to be a problem when you're paying Jordan that much money and he's not performing at that high of a level. It's definitely going to be a problem if that is in fact the case. I don't think we made any excuses for Matt LaFleur or Love. Scuzz, what's a positive takeaway from this game? Defense, certainly. Josh Jacobs was freaking awesome. Yeah, that's about it. I don't have much else for you. Again, I'm sure a couple other players will pop on tape when I put this one on, and I'm sure there will be a few guys who grade pretty well. I mean, I thought for the most part the secondary held up really well. I mean, the touchdown that they gave up. I mean, Jalen Hurts had a good solid 7 minutes to throw the ball in the pocket. Obviously the really bad Carrington Valentine play, but I thought outside of that, secondary looked good. This game is a bad indicator of it. They clearly need a couple more players. They're a couple players short. The injuries certainly set them back. The way this game started certainly set them back, but I still don't think on the whole this team is super far away. But like this game, they're a lot of their best players no-showed this one. I mean, Zach Tom looked like he had one of the worst games of his career. Jordan Love had a really bad game. It's a lot of their top wide receivers were not getting off of coverage early and often in this one. Rashawn was struggling early. I think he had a couple plays a little bit later. Kenny Clark, once again, seemed to kind of no-show this one to some extent. We'll see. Again, maybe he grades better than it looked like in real time. We'll see. But they need their best players to play better. And they clearly need a couple upgrades and a little bit better depth in some key positions. Tough to lose guys, but you have to have answers for it. Green Bay did not have answers for it in this game. Did you see a 55 million quarterback play this season? I didn't. Here's one thing I will add on this. And I talked about it, that if you have your top paid quarterback play at a not top quarterback level, it's going to cost you and it's going to hurt you. It is largely not Green Bay's fault, nor Jordan Love's fault that was the contract that he got. It sucks, and I don't know how to say this any other way than like that's literally just what you have to do in the NFL. The alternative is so awful that when you have these situations, it's basically what you're forced to do. And, yes, you could say, well, Jordan should have just taken less money. All right, well, good luck with that. And I don't want to hear the Tom Brady shit. Like, that happened once. Yes, Mahomes, took a team-friendly deal. That should not be what players have to do. I get that those two did, and it certainly helps those two franchises, but that is generally not what happens. And nor should it have to be that the player is willing to take less money. They should be able to earn what is out there for them. And like for Jordan and his agent, they did exactly what they should do in that situation. The Packers have to pay him in that situation. Again, the alternative is you have no QB. You go into the season without having a legitimate starting quarterback, and you're in purgatory. And likely in those situations, Brian Gutekunst and Matt LaFleur both end up on the chopping block because you don't have a QB to come in, and you have a lot of 5, 4, 6 win seasons, and you're in purgatory. So Jordan Love gets you at least out of purgatory. He is a playoff caliber quarterback. We've seen that for 2 consecutive seasons now. And he's going to make it so that if you do some things well, you're going to have a chance at things. But so that being said, it definitely limits you if you pay a quarterback that much money and he doesn't play at that level. And we've seen it time and time again. So it is paramount that Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love and this Packers franchise make sure that Jordan is put in a position to succeed, that they have him playing at the best of his abilities and get the most out of him, because otherwise you're probably just swimming too far upstream. It's really difficult to overcome a player that you're paying a ton of money to and you're not getting that ROI on. And by the way, you can point to the same thing with Kenny Clark and Rashawn Gary and a few other players that are on this roster as well, Jair Alexander, etc. You need your big time players to perform at the high level when you give them those type of contracts. That goes for anyone that gets a big deal, and certainly more so when it goes to a big quarterback. But Jordan got the deal that he had at that moment because that's what you have to do. The Packers had really no alternative in that situation. It's a sucky sort of form of how the NFL works in those situations. But if you don't have a quarterback, it literally is just a complete franchise and career killer for pretty much anyone that's on that team at the time. And so you have a quarterback that looks like he put it together at the time, came off a unbelievable stretch for a significant amount of games in the second half of that season, and you end up having to pay him. And yeah, I'll just kind of leave it at that. So again, that's the cost of doing business in the NFL. When you get a quarterback in that situation, they paid him, and now they're going to have to live with that, and they're going to have to figure out how they can make it successful with Jordan making one of the top quarterback contracts in the NFL. And that will change too in 2 or 3 seasons. That'll be a middle tier quarterback contract, right? More guys will get extensions and it'll go above and beyond what Jordan's making, and other quarterbacks will pay too. Well, this is what Jordan Love's getting, so I deserve more than that. And the cost will go up and up. And in a couple of years, we'll look at Jordan's contract and be like, oh yeah, he's actually like the 16th best paid or highest paid quarterback, and which will be probably what will be about right for him at that time. Maybe even a bargain if things go correct. But for right now, no, we did not see that style of quarterback this season, but there was no choice at the time. You can't let him walk. You're not going to trade him. You just have to pay him the going rate. You do the negotiation, you get it done, you move on, and you hope like hell that you can get the most out of it. Green Bay's got to find a way to get more out of it next year. That's the difference between a contender and a pretender. This team is not even close. Pass rush, garbage, quarterback play, no hiding it anymore. He's not it. Again, if you want to argue last few games, sure, totally understand. Was not good enough in this game. Not a good enough performance from Jordan. He, in the last 4 or 5 weeks, did not see the field particularly well, in my opinion, in really almost any phase, deep down the field, intermediate, short. Like he seemed very, very uncomfortable. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if the offense changed in some real legitimate way that he just didn't feel comfortable doing what was called. I don't know if it was receivers not getting off of coverage enough. I don't know if it was, I don't know. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was him trying to be so careful with the football that it almost made him second guess everything. I think he probably needs the offseason, get his head back right, get back into a rhythm, go through a training camp and a full offseason, work with his team, work with his quarterback's coach, get some confidence back. Let's see how he attacks it in 2025. I am nowhere near ready to say that's it. Jordan's done. He's a bum. He can't get it done. He clearly did not get it done at the end of this season. That's a very fair thing to say. But I'm not willing to say it's over. It's done with. Green Bay screwed this up. It's a nightmare. There's still a good quarterback there, and we've seen it, but he has to play better. Green Bay's got to put him in better positions to succeed, and they probably do. For those of you who've been calling for it, yeah, they probably do need to go out and get him a legitimate number one weapon to take a little bit more pressure off of him. Josh Jacobs is obviously fantastic. Christian Watson's going to be coming off an injury. You have to be worried about the head injuries now for Romeo Doubs and what that's going to mean for him and his career. I think Jaden Reed is clearly a good piece. Tucker Kraft clearly a good piece within the offense, but you probably, again, with Christian not coming back, you probably, or, at least for a good chunk of the season, you probably need a legitimate, really great wide receiver on one side. You would love, maybe some sort of rotation of Dobbs and Wicks and eventually Watson and whatever on the other side with Reed in the slot, Tucker Kraft, Josh Jacobs. Now you're cooking a little bit, but they probably need to give him a little bit of a bigger weapon at wide receiver and see if that helps him out, takes a little bit of some of the pressure off of him and gives him a go-to weapon in some of those big clutch situations. And again, maybe see if that even opens up some stuff for Reed and Kraft, etc. underneath. But no, there's no question about it. Jordan needs to be better, but I'm not willing to give up on him at all at this point. Let's not kid ourselves. Game was over the minute Nixon fumbled. Yeah, we talked about that. I talked about it all week of, we were going to be able to tell very early on in this game. Excuse me for a second. So not a beer. Wish it was a beer. It's Mountain Dew. That we were going to be able to tell very, very early what type of game this was going to be, what type of Packers team showed up. And we were able to tell very, very early. And it unfortunately was the wrong team in the wrong moment for the wrong reasons. Is it fair to say, despite the records, that this team has regressed? I think it is fair to say that the team took a step back in 2024, especially at the end of the season. And I think it's fair to be disappointed in that. I will say it once again. I don't think all progress is linear. I think sometimes these things have a way of going forward and then taking a step back, 2 steps forward, step back, and so on and so forth. It is going to be up to Green Bay now to show that, because there's 2 ways that this can go. This can be the new reality for who this team is, and they let this define them and say, yep, all right, this is who we are, and we're a mid team who can't beat great teams. Or they can learn from it. They can go make the mistakes, help the roster out a little bit in the offseason, take a step as a team, probably not be the youngest team next year. Obviously they've dealt with some things. They've gone through some adversity. They've had, 3 playoff games now as the youngest team in back-to-back seasons. Now it's time to show some real legitimate growth. So it's not a definer of the LaFleur Love era at this point. There's time to get better. There's time to improve. There's time to show that there can be something more special there. But this was a step back, and now it's up to, again, the main players involved to show that this is just a bump in the road and they have the ability to evolve off of this. It's frustrating and disappointing because they really, going through the adversity and taking those bumps against Minnesota, Detroit, Philly through the course of the season, did not make the necessary adjustments. In fact, it felt like they got worse as the year went along, not better. So it is, again, fair to question what that improvement is going to look like, how it's going to come, and what steps are going to need to be taken in order for them to actually see the fruits of that and actually be better in big games in 2025. Teller, it's not the fact that lost for me. It's how they lost. The only 2 guys that looked like they cared were Reed and Jacobs, and the defense. Yeah, again, defense I thought showed up pretty damn well in this game. Reed and Jacobs, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that, Tyler. It looked like they, especially offense and special teams, no-showed this one for a good chunk of the game. And I don't know how that happens. Don't know how that happens. I mean, when you set the tone right away with a fumble, that's a great way to get it started off on the wrong foot. But yeah, I don't know how, again, you come out slow and with about just the worst possible, performance that you could possibly have to start that game. It's unfathomable to me that that could happen again in a big game. Why is it in most games the Packer underdogs? Do they not come out with some fire and fight? They looked unprepared on offense and just lay down. I mean, you can certainly juxtapose that with Dallas last year. They were underdogs. They came out ready to fight, ready to dominate and kick Dallas right in the face. So I think you can't say it's been always. You can't say they've never done it because they did exactly that in Dallas. But this year, yeah, they never did. They were tight. I don't know why that is. I don't know. I wish I knew. And again, it does come back to Matt in a real way. Like that's his job to make sure that those guys are loose and excited and ready to go going into a game. They never found that. It never felt like this team was having fun. It always felt like it was a grind. It always felt like it was work. And they've got to, figure out a way to get a spark and to just kind of get it going and to just have a little bit more fun, a little bit more energy and intensity in these big games and not be so uptight and have these things go so wrong to start the game. But that was the story, and that was their MO in this entire season so far, or not so far. It's over now. Thank you for this year, Andy. We have a lot to do. Work just gets started, Alex. We're gonna have a really fun off season. I know it sucks right now. It stings right now. As I said on the pregame show today, I'm not ready for it yet. I want to be talking about Packers Lions. I want to be breaking down this upcoming game. I want to be talking about a Packers huge win over Philly. I want to be talking about all that stuff. I don't want to be talking about where Green Bay's picking in the draft and who their 2025 opponents are and who the free agents are that are going to potentially leave, what free agents they could potentially sign. Those are all really fun things that I love talking about. We'll go through the salary cap and we'll go through all that stuff. And you guys know, I don't know if there's anyone that nerds out about it quite as much as me come off season time. We'll get through all of that. And trust me, there's still a layer of it and a level of it that I'm excited for. Just really didn't want it to have it happen yet, but we will get started on that work right away, Alex. ASAP, 3rd and 3 with about 5 minutes to go, down by 9, and you run it up the middle with your backup running back with a loaded box. Please stop defending LaFleur. He doesn't understand time management at all. First of all, ASAP, what I will say is we don't know. I'd have to go back and look at it. It looked like Jordan was making checks on the line in that situation. That looked like it could have been a Jordan issue and not a Matt issue. I will say this, if you want to throw shit at Matt in this scenario, their hurry up 2-minute offense, being able to get in and out of plays and just go out there and run stuff was awful all season long. It was terrible all season long. That was a really, whether that was Matt or Jordan that made that decision in that moment, that cannot be the decision in that moment. The amount of time they were taking in that situation, the decision to run into the loaded box with Emmanuel Wilson, all of it was bad. So at the end of the day, whether it was something that Matt LaFleur called in the moment or that he even didn't have the ability to, make sure that his players were in the right calls and checks and getting up to the line and be able to flow quickly in those situations, that's on Matt regardless. So it did feel like Jordan sort of was doing some checks and stuff at the line, but yeah, the entire 2-minute operation, hurry up operation, the entire season looked like absolute hot garbage. So that is a fair criticism, and they're going to have to clean that up next year in a major way. Fleur needs to go too inconsistent and continues to be undisciplined. Again, I will very much disagree with that. I think he more than has earned and deserves more opportunities to improve and get better. You're talking about a coach who has made it to the playoffs in all but one season. His worst season was an 8-9 year. He's one of the most winningest regular season coaches in the history of the NFL. I get that this comes down to playoff wins and losses, big game wins and losses. We're not even remotely having this conversation. It's fair to criticize when we have been criticizing a crap ton with Matt. He is not on the hot seat. He does not need to be fired. He does need to take steps to get better. And just like I thought he took a step back this season, especially in some of the decision-making, and game management aspects, there's nothing to say that he can't get back to some of those things that he did really well prior to this last season. So there's going to need to be some self-reflection from Matt. There's going to need to be some conversations within the organization to Matt of what he needs to do better and get better. But no, guys, we could be talking about interviews with Arthur Smith right now and Rex Ryan, and like it's a joke. It's a stupid joke. He's not on the hot seat. It was a very disappointing performance. You can be as critical as you want, and again, I get anyone's disappointment and frustration. You have every right to be pissed. And again, if you want to debate it and say, hey, this game is evidence 1A, it's a hell of a piece of evidence. It was a really crappy performance from Matt, especially again in these last 3 games. On the total, if you have to take a wider view of this stuff. It can't just be in the moment. And I get the season has not gone according to plan. You're still talking about a playoff year, 11-7 in totality. And if that is the worst job that Matt's done in his career as a head coach, all right, that's almost more of an indicator of like, all right, if that's the worst it is, that's a pretty good basement to have. So no, I'm nowhere near agreement on that. And I think it's ridiculous, but a lot of things that you can point to that were really poor from Matt this season that he needs to get better at. Is Matt or Jordan the problem? Also, how many players are we away from being able to finally get to where we want? Joshua, I'll answer the second part of that first. I talk quite a bit about it's usually star players that get you across the finish line. You can have just a really good team that is completely lacking in deficiencies. That is one way to get there. But more often than not, it is stars that make it so that you win a Super Bowl. It is big time performers and big time performances. Usually one of those needs to be at the quarterback position, not always, but usually. So the first thing I would say is you need a much better Jordan Love than what you got, especially at the end of the season and especially in a really big playoff game. That needs to be a whole hell of a lot better. I would also say that Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney look like pretty big stars. Usually if it's a running back, that's not a good enough thing. A lot of teams have good running backs. That's a tough differentiator. And even like in a game like this, yes, you have a really good running back in Josh Jacobs. The team across from you arguably had a better one. Not arguably, like they have a better one. So that's going to be a tough differentiator. Safety is also a tough one because as we've noticed, especially in the second half of the season, sometimes there's only so much a safety can do. You need one, and you love having one like Xavier McKinney, and he can be a game changer, but teams can also kind of mitigate that and make it so that Xavier McKinney's not going to beat you. You go watch safety play, and there will be sometimes 8-9 plays in a row where Xavier McKinney's not even involved in the play on defense. So that is a challenge sometimes too. And then there's no other real stars on this team. I mean, your closest next one is Zach Tom, and he played maybe his worst game as a pro today. Again, you need your quarterback to be good. That did not happen today. And there's no other Edgerrin Cooper might get there, right? Like that could be a big step for this team, but you need good players, but that's not what's going to get you to a Super Bowl and have you win a Super Bowl. You need great players. You need stars. You need superstars. And right now, Green Bay is lacking in that. They need their big time players to play better. If Jair is back, he needs to stay healthy and play like a star. I don't think he's going to be back, but if he is, he needs to. Rashawn Gary needs to play far better than he did this year. Edgerrin Cooper needs to take that step into stardom. Xavier McKinney needs to continue to play like he is as a star. Zach Tom needs to play consistently, in big game. Like today, he did not play that way. Usually he does, but he needs to play like a star. Josh Jacobs needs to play like a star. He did today. And you probably need 1 or 2 more guys. We'll see if they can do that this offseason, but you need big time players in big time games and in big time moments. Green Bay has not had enough of that. And that's your differentiator. You look at Detroit, you look at Philly, you look at the best of the best, and they've got big time superstar players. And Green Bay, for the most part, does not have that. And that is the differentiator between a good team that can beat up on some lesser opponents and a great team that can actually beat really good opponents. And Green Bay is not a great team that can beat really good opponents at the moment. I need Matt and Jordan to be chained together all offseason. It seemed like they have been off towards the end of the season. I'm sure those two are going to be in very close contact. I'm sure those two are going to be working together. I think it's going to be an offseason where Matt takes a very hard look at the passing offense and figures out what went wrong, why it went wrong, and why there were problems, especially in the second half of the season. And they will, I'm sure, try to get it worked out. I think hopefully Jordan coming out healthy, excuse me, being ready to go for training camp and all those sort of things, not having to worry about a contract and that and all that stuff will hopefully get him off on the right foot. But they need to get that passing offense into a much better place than it was at the end of this year, where it was a burden. It was a drag. It was difficult to watch. And yeah, they need to get in a much better rhythm to start things off right away in 2025. $20, they draft O-line in the first round. I would take that bet. I think Sergio, they'll take at least 2 offensive linemen. I don't think it's going to be in round 1. It could be. It wouldn't stun me. But I don't think that's the direction that they will go. Obviously, still a little bit too early for draft talk, especially for me. We're going to get into that very fast, unfortunately. But possible, but I wouldn't put it at the top of the list. I would probably guess like there's a good chance at corner, although just the depth at that position and maybe makes that a little less likely in round 1. I think corner, defensive tackle, defensive end, offensive lineman still a possibility. Wide receiver is a possibility, but I don't know that this is going to be the year that they decide, yeah, we're going to take a first round wide receiver. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I guess it's not impossible, Sergio. Maybe you're right. We lost how we started as we did the whole year. There wasn't a real surprise here. Lock in and reload this offseason. This is a multi-year process. I like the long-term thinking pina colada time. I could use a pina colada right about now. Natalie, good to see you. You did great all year, Andy. I am done with any excuses. This team is underperforming. Place the blame where you want, but there's a lot of it. Fair enough. Like I said, if you want to point to anything this offseason, this season and say what went wrong, there's plenty of blame to go around. There's plenty of fingers to point. I'm still very much of the belief that there's not a teardown that needs to happen here, but there are steps that need to be put in place for this team in order to play better. And that starts with Matt. That starts with Jordan. Those are 2 fair places to point the blame. Not going again all in the direction of like major changes, but it needs to start there. That is a fair statement to make. And I don't disagree with anything that you said, Natalie. But again, I do like I like Pina Colada's philosophy here. Lock in and reload, multi-year process. Sometimes these things do take a little bit of time, but it needs to be better starting off right away next year. And it's hard because in a league that you need to take a wide view approach, it's really difficult to do that when your last 3 moments of the season were a really tough loss to the Vikings where the score was really not indicative of the fact that it wasn't a competitive game, a abysmal loss to the Bears at home in the final game, and then about as crappy of a performance as you could possibly want in your playoff game that leads you to a first round exit. Like that's the flavor that we are going to, the shit popsicle flavor that we are going to have on our tongue for the remainder of this, off season until they play a regular season game again. And hopefully we get, I don't know, something a little bit more like a pina colada that we could get. But that's the taste that we're going to have in our mouth coming off of that. So I get it. It sucks. We all want to take the wide view approach, but when you're left with that lasting image from those last 3 games, it is a crappy way to go out at the end of the year. What does it say when 7 years in, the 2 best players on the team are people Goody didn't draft? Goody found the formula. Just keep having the youngest team and he is off scot-free. Love is unimpressive too. Yeah, we talked about this to some extent, JJS breaks, in the fact that if you want to be great, you have to have great players. Kudos to him for getting Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs. Those are 2 Goody transactions. Those are 2 Goody, adds to this roster. So great job finding those guys. But you can't have, what is it, 6 years for Goody, 7 years for Goody, and not have a draft pick that looks like a Pro Bowler. Cooper, maybe Evan Williams. Like he just took 2 really good players. Zach Tom is pretty damn close, but to not have a signature draft pick right now on your resume. Again, I know Jair was there for a bit. I know Rashawn Gary is technically a Pro Bowler this year, but to not have those real signature players on this team that you've drafted that are making that huge difference, that's a problem. If you want to know, to me, the 1A reason why this team is maybe not to the place where you really want it to be, it's because you didn't draft really great players, especially in the first round. I was looking at this. Somebody pointed this out to me the other day. What was it? I don't even know if I want to go into the whole draft thing, but I think it was 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Right? If you look at 20, so again, 18 was Brian's first year, right? So this is not on him. but I was looking at this the other day. If you look at 2015 through 2018, it was basically 4 drafts that you got 3 players out of. Jair Alexander, who's had some injury issues to say the least, Aaron Jones, and Kenny Clark. In 4 seasons, those were the only 3 players that you really got. There's a couple. I mean, you get a Blake Martinez in there. You get a Dean Lowry in there. You get a Jamal Williams for a few seasons. You get an MVS in there, but that's it. I mean, 4 seasons, and you basically got Clark, Jones, and Jair through the entirety of those 4 seasons. And then, you look at 2021. 2021 is Stokes, Myers, Rodgers, Newman, TJ Slayton, Shamar Jean-Charles, Cole Van Lannon, Isaiah McDuffie, Kylan Hill. You can't have TJ Slayton be the best player in a entirety of a draft. You got to hit on something a little bit more than that. So yeah, you need to draft studs, you need to draft stars, and that has been an issue for Goody. I'm sure that's something we're going to talk about more when we get to the offseason. Wide receivers regressed so much this year. They did. Every one of them. Watson, I thought, did some good things. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that 29 touchdowns. I keep doing that. 29 catches and 3 touchdowns or whatever it was is, indicative of a major step for Christian Watson. And he got hurt again. As much as it sucks, he got hurt again. So I really liked a lot of what Christian Watson did when he was on the field, but we're not talking about a 1A wide receiver here, right? Romeo Doubs took a step back. Dontavian Wicks took a step back. Jaden Reed, at least for a good chunk of the end of that season, took a step back. I thought early on he looked really good. Thought today he looked good, but there was a chunk of 7-8 games there where it looked like he took a legitimate step back. Wasn't as consistent this season. Bo Melton took a step back. Malik Heath didn't do anything of note. So yeah, I thought it was one of the real disappointments this season is that not only did they not stay where they were a season ago, the collective group of all these young, talented players took a real legitimate step back in 2024, which was very disappointing. Realtor Alex, our defense played well enough to win us this game. I don't know if it's play calling or lack of talent with our pass catchers. Offense dropped it today. I agree. I will say, the defense didn't get tested in really huge moments in this one, right? It would have told me more if, Green Bay's offense, got a lead at some point and then the defense still held tough. But yeah, I don't even know that we need to nitpick the defense in this one. That's probably the least of our worries or concerns. They did enough to keep this thing as competitive as they possibly could have for 4 quarters. And I thought Jeff Hafley called a really, really good game. So we'll just leave it at that. The game is solely on Love and LaFleur. They lost us this game. Both were average all year, and I'm being nice. Yeah, again, fair to very much criticize LaFleur and Love in this game. Both of them were bad. It was not solely on them. Not solely on them. There were a lot of players that played like absolute hot garbage in this game. And when you start with a really bad fumble from Keyshawn Nixon, when Zach Tom has a really bad game, again, Love had a poor game. There were some other, key moments in this one. I didn't think the offense as a whole came out firing on any legitimate, whatever, on any cylinder. And then, Josh Jacobs got going late. Jaden Reed looked okay at times, but there was a lot that did not go right for this Packers team throughout the course of the day. So I wouldn't say that it was solely on Love and LaFleur, but if you definitely want to point to those two as being the main reasons, I would have a hard time arguing against that. Can't remember the last time I saw a Packer team get this out physically played and just literally beat up for 60 minutes. Yeah, again, I think the defense had its moments too, where they certainly hit back and had some good plays and were able to kind of hold Philly in check. But yeah, there was no like, oh, Green Bay maybe was the better team and they just didn't have some calls go their way or a couple moments here or there. No, they got outclassed in this game, and not to like a ridiculous extent. Because again, I think the defense kept it close, but Philly was the better team. They deserved to win. Green Bay had no right to win this game based on how they played. And it was, I think that's a huge reason why this one was so disappointing. How don't we learn from our mistakes in past games? Aiden, I wish I knew the answer to that, my friend. I don't know. It just did not seem like they could ever get out of their own damn way at any point, especially in big games. I mean, how many mistakes in this one? Holding penalties and interceptions, drops, all of it, just all the same story. Missed field goal, missed easy field goal, fumbles, just all of it. Just could not get out of their own damn way. Second year starting for Love, get him help. Yeah, again, we talked about that a little bit. Probably time to maybe make an upgrade at that wide receiver 1 position, give him a little bit more help, make it so that he doesn't have to do quite as much heavy lifting, and see if that can cure some of the ailments that you have on offense right now. But their offense needs to click in a much better way than it did, especially to end this season. This wasn't a failure, but it's definitely a big step back, especially compounded by the loss to the Bears last week. Very bad way to end the season. Totally agree, Fenrir. Injuries killed this season. It is what it is. Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, Fatal Blind Man. It didn't help, that's for sure. But you have to have a way to overcome what I would sort of say was 2 injuries coming into this game in Jair Alexander and Christian Watson, certainly 2 that you don't want. You didn't really feel the loss of Jair in this one in any significant way. Thought the secondary covered pretty well throughout the course of the game. They did enough on defense to win. Christian Watson definitely hurt, but you've got to be able to overcome an injury on offense. Now, I get in this game, yes, Elton going down and eventually Myers going down, Reed going down, Wicks going down, Reed going down, Dobbs going down. Was there another, or Jacobs going down? Obviously some defensive ones too. Yes, injuries in this one stung, but again, it wasn't like Green Bay was playing great and then injuries hit and you're like, oh, they lost because of the injuries. It definitely didn't help, but you got to be able to overcome that and have the next man up mentality and figure out a way to win still. And Green Bay did not figure out a way to do that today. Nothing ever changes for this team year after year. Disappointing losses where we don't show up. What do we need to do, Andy? Show up in big games would be a good start. Again, they did show up in Dallas in a significant way. I actually felt I would disagree with that from last year's team. I thought they showed up to both of those playoff games. I mean, they punched Dallas in the mouth and won big, and then they almost beat San Fran. They definitely showed up for that game. I mean, those are 2 totally different experiences than what we saw today. So this one definitely did not show up for, did not play a great game in. But yeah, we kind of talked about it. Starts with QB1, starts with a coach. Those 2 need to be a lot better. They need to find a rhythm on offense, probably need to make a couple upgrades on the depth chart, and they need to find a way to develop a few more stars on this team, because that's ultimately what's going to get you to the promised land is some stars. And if you don't have it, it makes it really, really difficult to get there. Sea Biscuits and Gravy, thank you so much for being a member for 14 months, my friend. Happy we have you doing what you do. Go Pack Go. That means a ton. Really appreciate that. Goodbye, Packers. I'm no longer a fan. I'm going to Cleveland where they actually know how to win. Just kidding. Can't wait for next year. Go Pack Go. Jack, I didn't know where that was heading for a moment. But I appreciate that you can have some levity and some humor in a very disappointing moment for sure. What does this team and staff need to do to eliminate the slow starts of the games where the team doesn't show up? I don't know, Adam. I really don't. I will say it never really felt like this was a team that felt confident in its own skin, that felt like they knew what they wanted to do and accomplish going into a game, that felt like they had something that they could really lean on. And it never felt like they were really having fun. That might sound stupid. This isn't youth sports, but you see teams that are playing well, having a lot of fun out there. You see the Chiefs, Travis Kelce's pitching the ball to wide receivers on plays, and there's just a joy in the way that they play. And you see the same thing with the Detroit Lions and the way that they're playing the game. I thought you saw it today with Buffalo. Good teams are out there knowing that they're better, knowing what they want to accomplish, how they're going to win, and they're having fun doing it. And I think when you have that confidence and you have that feel and you're out there having fun, everything just kind of clicks into place. Everyone trusts in each other, has that belief, and you go out and play at a high level. And it didn't feel like Green Bay had that confidence, and that will leave you searching for it and not going into a game playing to the best of your ability, because there's those questions that linger in the back of your mind. So that to me is a big piece of it, and they've got to figure out a way to remedy that this upcoming season. Nixon is overrated and set the tone. Loser by. Well, I hate to break it to you, TJ. He will be back. It was a really sucky moment to begin the game. Again, it did seem like a helmet to helmet, which is a tough situation in that moment. That was a big time physical hit. Kudos to Oren Burks for knocking that thing loose, but really awful moment. Thought he had a big tackle on one of the plays. I forget what situation. I think it was on Saquon later in the game. Obviously had the dumb penalty along the sidelines think Keyshawn has had an okay season. Is it somebody that you want as your top corner where he's had to play? No. Do I think he can be a really good, number 3, number 4 corner? Yeah, I do. But he was asked to do a lot this season. Don't think he was anywhere near as bad as Packer fans think he was. But this was at least two really tough moments in this one with the fumble and then the dumb penalty along the sideline. Just felt like a lot of players either didn't improve or regress this year, especially a wide receiver. So many mistakes. Excited for the future. Go Pack, go. Totally agree, Michael. Too much regression, not enough progress. And that, to me, that when we talk about a failure of a season or disappointing, that is the reason to me why it's not just the 1-5 division. It's not the first round playoff exit. It's not the 0-6 in big games. Those all play a part. Don't get me wrong. That all is a huge reason why it's disappointing, but it's also how many players either stagnated or regressed this year. Again, really tough to find. Tucker Kraft did, but I think you're also a lot of people are underestimating just how great Tucker Kraft got at the end of last year. Like we saw a very similar version of this Tucker Kraft at the end of 2023. Now, don't get me wrong. I think he took still a step. I think he's still trending the right way, but we saw a lot of this by the end of 2023. It wasn't this super new thing in 2024. He was playing awesome at the end of last year, which is why I was at the end of 2023 and in the offseason being like, yeah, guys, Tucker Kraft is tight end 1. You guys keep talking about Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft is tight end 1 because we saw it at the end of last year. So that was like, it was a step, but I don't think as aggressive as one because I think a lot of it happened at the end of 2023. I do think Sean Ryan took a pretty solid step this year. That's certainly not a star though. You're not being like, yeah, Sean Ryan is, top guard in football and that's why we're winning football games. He played a lot better. He's a good starter, but that's not enough. And then, like I said, I thought Carrington Valentine at the end of the year took a pretty solid step. Guys that they brought in this year, Evan Williams, Edgerrin Cooper, Xavier McKinney, Josh Jacobs were really, really good. Like that's a positive step, but too many players that were carryover, guys like Rasheed Walker, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs, Luke Musgrave when he was in there. Trying to think of others. Certainly Rashawn Gary, Kingsley Enagbare, Kenny Clark. Just way too much regression. Way too much regression from players that have shown that they can play well before, and not enough guys taking a step. So that's a problem. It's not what you want to see. As Matt had one disciplined team in Green Bay. I mean, 2020 was a very disciplined team. Listen, in a playoff game where the intensities are super high, if I'm being honest, I could have gone without either of those penalties being called. You're putting yourself in a position for them to be called by the letter of the law. They're both stupid. They're both callable plays. And as a referee, you have to understand just how amped up these situations are. And I get you don't want to, if Nixon just takes him and throws him with his full force to the ground. He gives a little bit of an extra shove at the end. Come on. These are gladiators. He's going to be okay, guys. He's going to be okay. And then the Slayton one too, is it stupid? Yes. Should you put yourself in that position? Yes. Can we have does that need to get called? No, I don't think it does. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that those are the only undisciplined plays by any stretch, but I think he has had disciplined teams. There were some really dumb moments this season, and Matt LaFleur's got to find a way to remedy that, correct it. Or they got to figure out a way to get the right guys on the roster that aren't making boneheaded decisions in some key moments. Roster feels like it needs more vets. To me, it's not a vet thing, Tyler. It's not. I mean, it's not just age. It's just they need a couple more big time players. They need a couple more stars. They need a couple more elite level talents, and they also need their best players to step up in the most. At the big times. We didn't see that today from Rashawn Gary, Zach Tom, Jordan Love, amongst others. But too many players that they need to play well did not play well in this one, and that's always going to get you beat. Amy, thank you for the super chat. There's a lot of super chats. Like I said, I promise you guys, I will get to absolutely all of the super chats before I get out of here. Do you think that Matt should consider hiring an offensive coordinator that can call plays? I feel like he's trying to do too much and may struggle with managing it all. I think I think sometimes when you do that, like if he's an offensive coach, I think when you do that, at times you can kind of take away from um, the things that you do best. Now, if he has faith in a Jason Vrabel or an Adam Stenovich or somebody like that to call the plays, could he consider it? Absolutely. Absolutely, he could. And maybe that's a step that you need to take for a little bit to kind of get things going on the right foot next season. But the last thing you want to do is also like get to a point where then like the offense is bad and then you've got to take the play calling responsibilities and take them back and those sort of things. I don't know. It's a really fair question. Excuse me. I don't think either his play calling or his in-game management at the end of this year were good enough. So Matt has to look at that and say, how can I be better? Is this something that I can take on to be better in all facets? Or do I need to have somebody that's helping me with the game management on game days to take care of the situations in which I call a timeout, don't call a timeout, go for it, don't go for it, whatever? Do I have somebody that takes on a little bit more of that? Or do I take somebody on who can do the play calling, whether that be a Jason Vrabel or an Adam Stenovich, whoever it might be? What's the best way for him to be successful and this team to be successful? Maybe he can do it. And I think he's done it in the past. So again, I'm not willing to give up all faith that he can't do it, but he's going to have to, again, take a look in the mirror and figure out how he can be the best coach possible for this team and or how he can be the best play caller for this team. Can he do both? What's in the best interest of the team and how can they be successful overall? So it's a fair question. I don't know the answer. My guess is it's still best for him to call plays and again, figure out a way to kind of manage all of that a little bit better. But it wasn't good enough this year. And he's going to have to ask that question and figure out what's best for him and the team moving forward. Brady and Fangio pegged Green Bay's offense from the outset. No surprises from LaFleur. Brady was laughing at Green Bay's offense for how predictable it was. And it worked. I don't know if there's anything more to that, Kevin. Sorry if I missed something here. But I think it did get just too stagnant and stale at the end of the season. It felt very much lacking in creativity, and it didn't feel anything like the offense from last season. And I don't know why. I really don't know why. It was the same quarterback. It was a running back that you could do some different things with, that I think gave you more optionality within the offense, not less. It was the same primary tight end, the same wide receivers, the same offensive line. Like they had an offense that worked at the end of last year, and they completely went away from it for really no apparent reason. And I still can't totally understand it. I know that teams have maybe caught on to Matt a little bit, but there needed to be an evolution there. It felt like the evolution was all things that went in the wrong direction. And I don't know why. It felt like they needed to get back to the core of who they were in 2023, not evolve into this new offense in 2024. But I don't know why. And yeah, it definitely felt like it was disjointed and lacking in creativity for a good part of the second half of the season. I think the only reasonable way to improve this team is to lobby Toyota to extend Toyotathon from September to February. Also trade for Max Crosby. The second one probably helps a little bit more than the first. Hey, we got 1265 people in the chat right now. What a beautiful number. I don't see the second one happening, although sign me the hell up if you can make it work. I think they could use an impact pass rusher. That would be a ton of fun. But also, hey, the last 3 weeks of the season were during Toyotathon, and the offense was not super great at that point in time either, unfortunately. Toyotathon might be dead. Who do you blame more for the offensive ineptitude recently? Matt LaFleur, love, player mistakes, lack of execution, percentage for each. The defense this year seems to be a bright spot going forward. Yeah, I definitely agree with that second part. I think it's a little bit of everything. I think it falls on Matt, the play calling, the play design, the game plan going in. I don't think that's been good enough. I don't think Jordan's been good enough. I don't think in this game particularly the pass pro was good enough. Run game looked good. Josh Jacobs looked good. I didn't think the receivers did a good enough job this year. So it's a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of everything, but it's always going to be a little bit more thrown at the quarterback and head coach, and right now, deservedly so. The end of the season stretch was just brutal and a pretty underwhelming season, all things considered. The defense was better, but so much work to do. We need to see a full season of healthy Jordan Love. I'm hoping for a season of healthy Jordan Love and one that feels a little bit more functional and a little bit more in rhythm and a little bit more, let's just say better. And yeah, very underwhelming, especially the end of the year. I do think the defense was better as well, fading west. I don't think so much work to do. A couple upgrades here or there. I still think the pass rush needs to be better, but definitely some steps in the right direction for the defense. Good defense, battle line. Andy the GOAT. Thanks, man. Shane, you are very kind. I appreciate you, sir. A reset might be what this team needed. Needed a lot of self-reflection from Matt LaFleur and Love. Nothing looked easy all season for the offense like it did last year. Yeah, I don't believe in the reset, but I do believe that they do need to take that long look in the mirror, a long period of self-reflection. And I do think that the offense is going to have to reinvent itself a little bit in 2025 and figure out a way to make things a little bit more easier and a little bit more connected within this offense. And it just never felt that way in 2024. I think that Matt's argument with a fan in Detroit was that cannery in the coal mine in terms of temperament and composure. I still go back to like, I love how competitive that Matt is. I love the fact that he has his players' backs. I love how fiery and emotional he is. I know how much he wants to win, and I know how much he cares about his guys. And I actually think that in the end, those things are really positive things overall. Now, how he channels that is important. How he gets that from a passion and desire and competitiveness into funneling into something positive, that is something that I think he can work on. But I would still rather have that than a coach who, just is lacking in that emotion, doesn't have his players backed, doesn't want to go to battle with his guys. I like the way that I overall appreciate the fact that Mike cares and how badly he wants to win. But there are probably better ways to channel some of that. I didn't think, again, the thing in Detroit was really that big of a deal. I thought it was mostly much ado about nothing. But yeah, I do think he needs to figure out a way to probably lead by example a little bit better in those situations and to make sure that, again, he's channeling those feelings of competitiveness and frustration and, desire to have his teams back and channeling it in a positive way to go out there and motivate his guys rather than maybe, doing some of the stuff that he's doing right now. That season certainly kept us on our toes. Thanks for all your hard work, Andy. Hayden, you are more than welcome. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for all the support. Thank you to all of you for the support. I know not everyone can super chat. I know I know not everyone can be members. It never is that a prerequisite. I try to get to some non-super chat questions. Obviously today I'm already running a little bit short on time here, and we've got a crap ton of super chats. So I'm going to get to all of those, but just know, even if you can't get your question in, or if I can't get you today, or if you're not a member, those things are always appreciated. It's never an expectation. Thank you so much for supporting Pack-A-Day. I cannot thank you guys enough. Like, comment, subscribe, give those 5-star reviews where you can. But yeah, it's never a prerequisite. I appreciate all of you so freaking much. And Hayden, I really appreciate the kind words. It's been a fun season, fun to talk about one way or the other. Disappointing, but still fun, and looking forward to what this offseason is going to bring, and then what we see this team accomplish in 2025. Thanks for a great season, Andy Crew. We only get 17 guaranteed a year, and I feel like a lot more gratitude than frustrations at the end of the season than I used to. I feel there is so much good in front of this team, including 10. The short diabetic, I appreciate the positivity. I appreciate the super chats. I still think there's a lot of really positive things ahead for this team. I know, again, we've got that, crap taste in our mouth right now, but long way to go. Youngest team in the league, second youngest team in the playoffs over the last 45 years. The only younger team was last year's playoff team. Still a lot of opportunity for growth, a lot of free agent money to spend, another draft to go out and acquire players that just so happens to be in Green Bay as well. So opportunities to improve this team. Not a lot of free agents that could, really potentially leave that would be harmful. This team has the ability to look a good degree better in 2025 on paper than what they looked at the end of 2024. And that should be exciting to everyone. And hopefully they can take that next step. And meanwhile, some of the good teams will take a step back, and there will be other teams that take a step forward. And I think Green Bay will be in that conversation as to one of the teams that's really looking to compete at a high level once again next year. But clearly they need to take some steps in a positive direction in order to be able to do so. Goddard took Valentine's manhood. Where was 88? Yeah, that was a rough play for Carrington Valentine. That's one he's going to have to watch back on tape over and over. And he's going to see that one for a while. That's going to be a big time play for Dallas Goedert. That is on his all-time highlight reel. Meanwhile, Musgrave is just not a major piece in this offense. I think people need to understand that. And I'm not saying that Musgrave can't still take a jump, but there is nothing that Musgrave does particularly well at the moment. He's not a good blocker. He does not separate at an elite level. His run after the catch is a little bit clumsy. And there's nothing in specific that you look at Musgrave and be like, oh, look at what he brings to the table. So I know that there's this desire. I talked about it multiple times this week. The idea of Luke Musgrave has been better than Luke Musgrave. It makes sense, right? 6'6" guy that runs really fast, that can threaten the seam, be a red zone target, those sort of things. That just has not come to fruition in his career so far. Not to mention he's been banged up a ton and is still kind of working his way back into, playing a few more snaps here and there. But this was never going to be a Luke Musgrave breakout game. I still am bullish on him moving forward. Tight end's a tough position to learn in the NFL. He's been massively injured for the first 2 seasons of his career. But yeah, there was not going to be a Luke Musgrave breakout game in this one. And that's going to have to hopefully wait till 2025. And hopefully it does happen in 2025. Amy, thanks again. Why wasn't that recovery yard ball? It looked like Nixon had it and the defender pulled it away while he was on the ground. I don't know. I really tried to make it so that I don't just, complain about official stuff because you can't control it, and just don't put the referee in a position to be in that spot in the first place. Don't put the ball on the ground. That opening play set the tone for everything. And I hate the fact that it was a helmet to helmet. Probably could have gotten called there. And I hate the fact that it looked like there was a very clear and obvious recovery for anyone with 2 eyes to see. I don't know why no penalty was thrown. I don't know why it was not overturned to being Green Bay's ball. Usually I can, kind of see it both ways or be like, all right, well, maybe they didn't have full visual evidence. It was very, very clear to anyone with 2 eyes that Keyshawn Nixon had that, was down, recovered the ball, and then it was ripped away from him again later. I don't know why it was not Green Bay's ball. I really do not. Wish it was. I am not in the bitter mood of like, yep, that's what the difference was. If Green Bay played really good football and this was like a, 31-33 game or something like that, and Green Bay lost, and we would go back to point to that play and be like, that's why, I would be a lot more bitter about it. I thought Green Bay was not the better team in that game. Also, like, can we be realistic for a second? If Green Bay somehow came back and won that game, you're probably going to Detroit next week with no Josh Myers, no no Romeo Doubs, no Christian Watson, no Jaden Reed. Who knows what Josh Jacobs' status was going to be for that one? Who the hell else got hurt in that game? Potentially no Devontae Wyatt, no Elton Jenkins. They would have lost by 30. Like, they might have lost by 30. So yeah, the way that team ended up coming out of that game, even if it was a recovery, and even if Green Bay goes on to win that again, who knows the butterfly effect after that first play, right? Maybe everything in that game goes different from there on out. Maybe there are no injuries. Who the hell knows? But they were not the better team. And even if somehow Green Bay found a comeback in that one, that probably would have been a very ugly matchup based on all the injuries that came out of that game going forward against Detroit. The Dolphins didn't pay Tua like the Packers did Love. The argument that the Packers had to pay, I don't buy. Well, Tua hadn't been as good, and nor had he shown the upside. Like, that was the going rate for Jordan Love. Like, Green Bay didn't overpay him in the moment based on that. And also, if I remember correctly, I don't think the Tua and Love contracts are really all that different. It was and also you have to remember, Tua also had major injury issues that really clouded that. 4 years, $212 for Tua. 4 years, $220. It's $8 million difference. So it was 4 years, $212 extension for Tua. 4 years, $212.4. So less than $8 million. So less than $2 million per year. And it had potential upside of $221 million. 221.4 million was the upside, and up to 221.5 for Jordan Love. So the difference was actually completely minimal. And Tua was coming off a major, major injury, where the head injuries were something that we're legitimately wondering if it was going to alter the entirety of his career. So yeah, no, not actually much difference there at all. Andy, love your show. You always calm down my overreactions, but if I have to watch them come out in the shotgun against a good pass rush again, I might lose my mind. That goes back to Rodgers against Tampa. I could not agree more, Ryan. I hated the offensive design in the early parts in the first half of this game. Hated it. I don't know if there was a injury situation. I don't know what the rhyme or reason was. Maybe Matt LaFleur had a good reason, but it was stupid. I don't know why. Um, yeah, I don't know why that ultimately happened. So I was just checking a couple things on the old phone there for a moment. Shout out to Valentine out there trying his best to bring Derrick Henry and that stiff arm down. Wait, that wasn't Henry. It was not Derrick Henry. Unfortunately, R. Smith. Thankfully, they did not have to go against Derrick Henry. I don't know what that would have looked like, nor do I know if I wanted to see that. Are we sure wide receiver talent isn't a issue for Love? No, I'm not sure about that. I do know that there are things that Love can do better regardless with decision making and accuracy. I do know that there are things that Love can clean up regardless, but I do think the receivers can be better, need to be better, and they need to have a little bit better early separation so that Jordan can hit the back of his drop, have open wide receivers, and play within the rhythm of the offense. So to me, as Matt has pointed to on numerous occasions, this is everything. This is Matt. This is design. This is play calling. This is having options at the line of scrimmage to get into better calls. This is Jordan playing with better footwork and accuracy. This is wide receivers getting better separation. This is better pass protection. It all comes together. And if any of those things are broken, it's going to look bad. And there were too many of those things that were broken and not working in tandem and in conjunction with one another to be better. And that's why it needs improvement in this offseason for sure. Matt LaFleur, bad play calls, can't motivate. What does he do? I wouldn't say in totality that he doesn't motivate. I don't think he's had his team ready to go in these big games, which has been massively disappointing. I think that's been mostly something that's been a little bit more on this season than in seasons past. Bad play calls in this season. In years past, he's been one of the, I think, more creative and better play callers. I think that was not always the case this year. So again, this was a disappointing season for Matt, the offense, Jordan, especially at the end of it. Wasn't always that way. I mean, they had a game of 5 consecutive 30-point performances just a handful of weeks ago. Wasn't always awful, but it got worse as the season went along. And I think there were some things that got a little bit stale through the course of the season. So I think to say that everything's bad with Matt is not fair. But I think that some of the things that he has done well throughout the course of his career took a hit, especially towards the end of the season. And he's got to find a way to get a little bit of that magic back. Andy, you literally blocked me for saying Matt LaFleur criticism is warranted. I can promise you, Clive, that I did not block you for something, for saying something like that. I can almost guarantee you it was how you said it would be my guess, but I don't know. But I can usually tell you that it is not how or like what people disagree with. It is usually how they disagree. So that would be my guess, Clive. Actually, and I think if I remember correctly, there are multiple douchey comments if it's the same user that I'm thinking of named Clive on Twitter. So yeah, thanks for the $5 though. I think people need to RELAX with the Love takes. Good quarterbacks do not grow on trees. Just ask Cleveland. You can build an offense around Jordan. I think that's fair, Fading West. I also understand that people recognize that you usually need at least like a top 10 quarterback in order to win a Super Bowl. And I think it's fair when you pay a top 10 quarterback, even though I think that's basically what kind of Green Bay and had to have happen in that situation. When you pay a top 10 quarterback, you want them to be a top 10 quarterback. And the expectation is a top 10 quarterback. And by the way, even though that was the situation that both Jordan and the Packers were in, you also know as an organization and as a quarterback that when you sign that deal and become one of the highest paid quarterbacks in football, the expectations go to a 30 on a scale from 1 to 10. Goes with the gig. So I think, saying that, Malik Willis should start or that Jordan's a bum or anything like that, or that they need to immediately start quarterback shopping, I think that's very, very much a step too far. Do I think it's fair to say that Jordan played like pretty hot garbage in this game? Yeah, I do. I think there's a really poor performance from Jordan at first glance. Again, we'll see. Maybe it doesn't look as bad on all 22. I'd be surprised if it looked good. I'd be very surprised if I go back to the all 22 and be like, yep, actually Jordan played amazing. I don't think we're going to be having that conversation, but I think the expectations are fair. I think Jordan needs to play better. And if this team wants to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender, then he probably needs to play like a top 10 quarterback. And he is paid like a top 2 quarterback. So criticism is fair. I do think it's too far. Again, I'm not giving up on Jordan. I think he can be a really good quarterback. But again, these questions are now fair. They're fair game. And now they're going to, both Jordan and the Packers are going to have to answer them at a high level in 2025, where things get worse before they get better, is what we're kind of facing right now. Haroon Shaludin, thank you for the super chat. Can and should they pursue Max Crosby or Myles Garrett? Should they try to pursue somebody like that? Sure. I think you should reach out and see what the going rate is. I would be willing to tell you right here and now that if you told me that the Packers traded for Max Crosby or Myles Garrett, I would pretty much fall out of my chair in shock. And I can tell you that even the odds that either get traded, I think, are probably slim, although you never know with either of those franchises. But if they do get traded, I can almost guarantee you that some team will make a god offer that Green Bay will not overtake, right? Like if either of those players do become available, some other team will be willing to give 1,000 first-round picks and everything else, and Green Bay will be like, actually, we're good, and they will not be the team that offers more than any other team. That's a tale as old as time. But if an unbelievable player like that comes available via trade, some team, one of the 32 teams, is going to offer the treasure chest of everything, right? And it's not going to be Green Bay. That's not in their DNA, not what they do. So should they have the conversation? Sure, absolutely. Do I see it happening? I would give it a solid 0.01% chance. Pina Colada again. Super young team, defense in year one with Halfley, draft plus cap space, plus development, and we will be back better next year. I very much agree with all of that, Pina Colada. I do think things will be better next year, and I do think they have a lot of avenues to get better, and it's really hard to envision an avenue, barring major injuries, in which they get significantly worse because, again, the bar is set. They do have young talent. They do have more draft picks. There's not really anyone outgoing of any note, and they do have free agency money to spend. So it should get better from here. Can never guarantee anything, but all things considered, it should get better, not worse. Donald, you are more than welcome, my friend. Very, very kind of you, and thank you so much for that. I've felt disappointed before. This wasn't that. Meaning this was worse than disappointment, or that this was less than disappointment. I'm assuming you mean worse than disappointment. I actually feel like this was disappointment. I don't know. I don't think it's worse than that. I don't think it's complete and utter failure. I don't think it's less than disappointment. I think disappointment's right about right. To me, I think this is a very disappointing end to the season, and there's no two ways around it. I don't think there's really any other way to define it, quite frankly. So I don't know if you mean worse or better, Lance, but I think very disappointing is about the right level of accuracy for this one. Green Bay needs superstars. They signed 2 major free agents, absolutely, and got great ROI in both of those free agents, and those are their 2 stars. 2 is not enough. And you cannot just sit on the 2 free agent signings alone and not develop stars within your team. If you here's how I'll put this, Kevin. First and foremost, if you think 2 is enough, you are mistaken. If the 2 are, Brett Favre and Reggie White, now granted that team was stacked too with unbelievable players all throughout it, but maybe that can get you there. If it's prime Aaron Rodgers and Charles Woodson, I will once again remind you there were other players playing at an incredibly high level, but maybe that can get you there. If it's a safety and a running back, I can almost guarantee you that that's not going to be what gets you there. Those are as much as those are 2 premium players. I would still argue that safety and running back, not usually your premium positions, that's going to get you to the promised land if that's all you have. I'm not saying that obviously Saquon Barkley can't be a big time performer. Even somebody like a Nick Collins in 2010, like that can't be a player that gets you, over the hump with whatever. But like just a star safety and a star running back, probably not enough in and of itself. Not probably. There's no probably about it. Not enough in and of itself. Number 1, you need more stars. Number 2, you usually need them at more premium positions, including the most important one at quarterback, where you need at least, like I said, probably a top 10 quarterback at worst. And Jordan did not play that way for a good portion of the season, and certainly did not play that way today when it mattered most. But yes, kudos to Goody for going and finding Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, the 2 lone stars on this team, in my opinion. I'll take Mullers over pass blocking. I'll chance it. Let's change going forward. I would say again, Ralph, that I don't think there's a perfect way to do this. I quite frankly, I'm fine with the philosophy that they're using. In fact, the run game was good enough today. It is, early on it probably wasn't, but overall, I think still good enough. The pass protection is what let them down in this game. The pass, not just that by any means, but when it comes to a blocking standpoint, they weren't good enough in pass pro. Too many penalties, not enough depth. And then even guys like Zach Tom were struggling in this one. So I have no problem with you building a pass blocking offensive line, but by God, you better pass block in big moments. And they certainly did not do that today. All right, Randy, give me 1 second. All right, to be honest, we're stuck with Love anyways. Mid quarterbacks are elevated by elite offensive lines. That needs to be the focus. You'll be surprised if the offensive line and wide receiver group takes a jump next year, just how much that's going to make Love look like a different QB. Now, I do think they protected him well throughout the course of the season. So I think just pinning this on the offensive line is a bit not fair. I think, and again, Jordan needs to do things to improve his footwork accuracy and vision as a quarterback, period, regardless of anything else. But if you get a really good pass blocking offensive line, Jordan just gets back to playing with a little bit more confidence and the wide receivers get open just a little bit more, you'll be stunned at how this goes from an offense that looks floundering to an offense that looks very potent in a very short period of time. Love interceptions, 2 underthrow, 1 vision, season in a nutshell. Fair. I mean, he didn't throw picks in the second half of the season. That did not happen at a significant level. He took much better care of the ball, but in big games and big moments, he just wasn't good enough. And today just had a really bad game. Did not have good vision on it. Did not have good fundamentals and accuracy. That stuff will get you killed. That stuff will absolutely get you killed. Puerto Rican Packer, thank you for the super chat. Frustrating end of the season. I'm not out on the floor, but he's too stubborn. He tends to stick with bad game plans, ineffective coaches, and underperforming draft picks a bit too long. Do I agree? No, I think there's probably some truth to all of that. I think that's an organizational thing where they stay a little bit loyal for a little bit too long on some of that stuff. I don't think that's just on Matt. I think it's always a double-edged sword because you don't ever really want to let go of somebody too fast either. I mean, they let go of guys like Kamal Martin and Amari Rodgers pretty damn fast. Now they let Amari Rodgers go out there too often, too much, and they got rid of Sternberger pretty fast. So it's not like they haven't moved on from guys. They moved on from Anders Carlson after a season. They will move on from guys. But yeah, there's probably some level of truth to all of that, Puerto Rican Packer. This loss exposed some things, but we as fans need to realize we have a sufficient head coach quarterback combo, clean up what failed us this year, have a strong draft, add some pieces, get, I will say, more experienced rather than older. I think that's fair, Adam. I also understand why there are question marks coming for Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love following this end of season performance. Now, I don't think it should be, huge statements of nuke everything, but I think it's fair to say, will the real Jordan Love please stand up? Who is the real Jordan Love? Is it the one that we saw end of 2023 and moments of 2024? Or is it the one that we saw for a good chunk of this year in the playoff game this year, 49ers game last year, in the beginning of last year? And that's a big chunk of games too. Which one is it? That's a pretty big determining factor for the remainder of his career as a starter in Green Bay. If they figure out a way to unlock him and get him playing consistently like he did at the end of 2023, it changes everything. I mean, you're talking about a legitimate Super Bowl contending team. And if this is more the Jordan Love, where it's not throwing with a ton of confidence and accuracy, not seeing the field well, throwing off his back foot, playing with poor fundamentals, and not being a playmaker, that's going to change the trajectory of this team quite a bit. And here's where I get somewhat frustrated is I think it's just as ridiculous for anyone to say, yes, he's unequivocally the answer. He's the guy. He's going to be a top 10 quarterback. As I think it's as ridiculous at this point to say he's a bum, cut him, get rid of him. They never should have signed him, etc. I don't think there's a sample size big enough of either of those things at this point to be that aggressive in either direction. I think the questions are fair. I think if anyone's looking at it glass half full, you can clearly look at it and say, I've seen some really good stuff from Jordan Love, and I'm not willing to believe that he cannot be a good to really good quarterback in this league. And I totally appreciate that thought. I also think you can look at the stuff that he has done for a good chunk of this season, injured or not, and for portions of last season, and say, hey, there's some real legitimate concerns and questions as to who he can ultimately become and if he can play with a level of consistency. I think both of those are fair views to have. I think any question mark is fair. I think going completely, he's unquestionably a top 10 quarterback and great is not being true. And I think saying nuke it, cut it, it's over with, he's a bum is also not true. I think there is enough sample size of each to say, I'm legitimately confused and I'm legitimately wondering which version of that we're going to see come out in 2025. I think it's fair to question how much the injuries played a factor, how much the non-separation and some of the stuff surrounding him played a factor. But I think any of the extremes, and I'm an extreme person more often than not. Like I'm either like all in or all out. Like let's go in a direction and figure it out. I think there's enough open questions there, both positive and negative for Jordan, that I just don't think we know exactly who he is, or this is just who he is. Meaning in any given game, you could get an A or an F, and we just don't know. You could get quarterback that looks like a Hall of Famer, or you might get, Dan Orlovsky. We just don't know which one you're going to get in any given moment. And that's obviously not a way to live. So that's not a good answer, by the way. If that ends up being what it is, that's not a good outcome for Green Bay, clearly. It's great that he has that Hall of Famer, in him from game to game. But if unless you can put 4 Hall of Famers in a row, and I guess Eli Manning did this to some extent, where you just get hot at the right time and perform really well in the playoffs and be a super mediocre regular season quarterback and then just become God come the playoffs. If Jordan wants to do that, fine, so be it. But outside of that, it's not good enough, because you're usually going to have too many hiccups along the way. That's not going to get you to the place where you want to go. So to me, it's one of 3 things. Either there is that really great quarterback there and they just have to find a way to make it more consistent, or a handful of really good games have been a little bit more of a fluke and he's not the answer, or this unknown somewhere between Aaron Rodgers and Dan Orlovsky on any given Sunday, and you don't know which one you're going to get, is the way we're going to live. It's one of those 3 things. And I don't know that anyone can look anyone else in the eye and say that they know exactly for sure at this point. And that's why I think the questions are fair. And that's why I think 2025 is going to be a massive season for Jordan Love, the Packers, and this offense to really define. Because now you're even if we want to be leaning on the side of hey, let's just pretend that this is year 3. Even though we know he sat for 3 years and this is actually year 6 coming up. That's right? Or is this year? All right. So he's drafted in 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So 25 would be year 6, right? I don't know. Math is hard. I'm too far out on this one. I think this would be year 6 because he sat for 3 years. And then last year would be year 4. This would be year 5. And then year 6 is this year. I think that's right. Or year 6 would be next year. So either way, 5 years, 6 years, doesn't matter. That should be you're more defining. But even if we're saying year 3 next year as a starter, well, by year 3, you better be able to define yourself as a quarterback. And to me, that is what's going to be really interesting for this team next year is who is Jordan Love, and can the real Jordan Love please stand up? But again, I think saying in either direction that we know unequivocally who he is, I think that's a little bit false at this point. Just again, my opinion. Do you think it's time for a sure wide receiver 1? I think the conversation legitimately needs to be had. I think it's fair. I'll take the L on this one. I still think that there's worlds in which some of the wide receivers on this team can take a step in that direction. I think we've seen wide receivers in year 3 do that before. Clearly, it did not happen in any significant way for Christian Watson or Romeo Doubs this year. I think just to imagine that Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks are going to be an unquestioned number 1 stud wide receiver next year are probably a little bit wishful thinking. Not to mention that Doubs now has multiple concussions of a serious nature this year. Not to mention that Christian Watson is going to go into next year probably not being able to play at least until midway through next season. Not to mention that Bo Melton and Malik Heath did not take any significant steps. So whether or not they go out and get a alpha true number 1, I don't know if they do that, but they're going to make some, I think, additions to that wide receiver room in some legitimate way. And whether that means they get a true number 1 or guys step up or whatever, either way, I think it's fair to have the conversation and see if they can upgrade that room and get Jordan a little bit better of a playmaker that maybe is a little bit more reliable on the outside. I think it's a fair conversation and a fair question. No, it probably won't happen, but man, I hope we bring Devontae home. The wide receiver room needs leadership, and I feel like Adam secretly wants back. Would be a fun addition. I will very, very much admit that would be a very fun addition. All the stuff you mentioned about Goody is why I feel this year is a failure of talent more than coaching. Need a real cornerback, run stoppers, and wide receiver. Well, I agree with the premise, Jonathan. However, I will say I don't think the corners were an issue in this game. I thought they covered well on the outside for a good chunk of this game. I thought the run defense overall against Saquon up until that last one where he could have broke it, where the game was already over and he just slid down, was pretty damn good considering they're going against the best offensive line in football and Saquon Barkley, and their run defense over the second half of the season was damn good. And wide receivers a fair assessment. But so yes, I think, some of the things that we talked about with Goody is fair to say that there needs to be a bit more of an influx of high-end talent. But I think those positions, at least in this game, outside of maybe wide receiver, were not a massive issue in this game. Don't understand how Goody passes on blue chip prospects during the NFL draft. Christian Gonzalez, Brian Branch, Cooper DeJean, etc. There's been some opportunities there and certainly some missed ones. Christian Gonzalez was a big one over LVN. That one definitely stung in the moment. And then even still at this point, there've definitely been some opportunities and they're going to have to figure out a way to be a bit better. He's done some really good work on days 2 and 3. Edgerrin Cooper looks like a stud. Evan Williams looks like a really good player. So there's still some positive things there, but definitely some missed opportunities to say the least. Alex, thanks so much for the chat, my friend. Rank offensive lineman, cornerback, defensive lineman, wide receiver in terms of need this offseason. I think a pass rusher is the most important. Then I'll say wide receiver, then then corner, then offensive line. That's probably how I'd order it right now. Would those return decisions be on Bisaccia? Yes. Love is a good quarterback, but I'm a bit worried he's another Dak, Tua, or Herbert. Great in regular season, not so much in postseason. Not giving up on him, though. Again, I think those are the questions that he's going to have to answer, and I think that's what we need a better, or at least more defined this next year is who is the real Jordan Love, and what's the ceiling? What's the ceiling? What's the floor? And what can you expect moving forward? Again, I think 2025 is going to be a really important season for Jordan. John, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that, my friend. Think fast, Andy, GM Herman, top 5 offseason to-do list. We just kind of went through that a little bit, but I do think you need to get, if I'm Goody, I'm going into this offseason thinking I need one more weapon on defense and one more weapon on offense. I need one more playmaker that can that can stretch the field or be a big time run after the catch guy, or just like a reliable over the middle. If I get in trouble, I can throw it to this dude. I need one more weapon on offense and I need one more pass rusher on defense. That's what I'm going into this offseason really thinking. And then I just want to round out my roster as best I can after that. But I'm going to go in feeling like I got a Jacobs and a McKinney last year. Now I need one more weapon, probably a wide receiver on offense, and I need a pass rusher on defense. If I can get that, now those are probably my free agent to-dos. Now, I think in the draft, you're probably drafting a corner very early. I think at wide receiver, you're probably taking one of the top 4 rounds. I think you're probably taking 2, if not 3 offensive linemen in the draft at some point. I think you want to start solidifying the interior of the defensive line. You might lose TJ Slayton, so that can be something that you're looking for in the draft as well. So I think there are some positions that need to be rounded out. But if I'm Goody, I'm saying I need 2 more home runs. I did it with McKinney and Jacobs. I need to do it again. And I'm looking at wide receiver and pass rusher as the 2 ways that I need to do that, either via the draft or trade or free agency, probably free agency in an ideal world, or again, maybe some sort of trade. But that's my to-do list first and foremost. And then I need to re-sign probably Brandon McManus. I think the 30-yarder was a fluke, and I think he's still been really good. But I probably need to get a kicker as well, and probably just bring back McManus at some point. So my top 2 are a big time weapon as best I can as a pass rusher on defense, and then another weapon on offense. That's what I'm looking for. Young team that read their press clippings at the end of last year, in my opinion, time to get back to work. Man, I saw this team be pissed off at the end of this game. I'm pissed off that they weren't pissed off sooner to get the work in that they needed to do. Because that's all we've heard about this team. They love the work. They love the tape study. They live and breathe football. All right, then put the damn work in and get better. I think they're pissed off. I think they're frustrated. I think they understand that they're not good enough. Now will they put the requisite work in to get better to the point where they can be a legitimate contender next year? And that goes for everyone. That goes for the players that need to take a step forward. That goes for the GM who needs to add a couple pieces. That goes for the coach who needs to be better for his team. It's all encompassing. Everyone just needs to do a little bit more, and you end up with something that's a lot better on the whole. That would be great. We'll see if it can actually happen. My balls itch. I needed a good message from my balls itch to get me a little bit of relief here today. Should that have been a pass interference near the end of the game? Yeah, probably. I actually, in general, hate that pass interference call because how I view it is the person intercepting the ball. It almost, to me, is like, you know how if it's tipped at the line of scrimmage, you can't have a pass interference on the back end. I get that the pass interference happens first, but before the ball would have been able to get to the receiver in the first place, the intercepting player cut it off. Like how I would view that is that the ball is uncatchable because there's a defender that's in front of it that's going to clearly pick it off. That's not how the rule is written, for the record. So based on how it's written and based on how I've seen it executed, yes, that should be a pass interference, and Green Bay should have had the ball at first and goal in that situation instead of having an interception there. They still need an onside kick. It doesn't matter. Again, the better team won this game in Philly. I'm not going to be bitter over it, but should that have probably been an interception? Yes. Do I need that in real life to actually be an interception when it was clearly going to be, or sorry, should it have been a pass interference when it clearly was going to be an interception? Either way, no, I don't. I think that's something that they can probably correct, but by the letter of the law, yes, that should have been a pass interference. Matt LaFleur Love combo should not get more than 3 years. If a franchise keeps hoping 4+ years, it's going to work. Good effing luck. Well, again, if you're looking at okay, you want to give it 3 years. Year one was a pretty unmitigated success. Go to the playoffs, get a big playoff win. Love's looking great at the end of the year. Offense is cooking. Should have beat San Fran had it not been arguably for a missed field goal at the end. So, all right, year one, check. Year two, step backwards, multiple Jordan Love injuries. Still make the playoffs at 11-6. You win 3 games with a backup quarterback. 2 of your losses at the end of the year were after you clinched the playoffs and didn't really have a ton to play for at that point in time anyway. And you have a really shitty performance in the playoffs. So if you want to strike one on that one, okay. Even if that's the case, you probably have 2 more years of saying, let's see of defining it. Because to me, I think the first year was a pretty big success for Matt and Jordan, all things considered. Year 2 took a step back. Now, what to me defines it, right, is if year 3, year 3 could go in so many different directions. If year 3 takes another step back or a significant step back, then yeah, I don't know. If it takes a significant step back, yeah, then geez, things really effing change at that point. Like, yes, then we are very much talking about what the hell is going on with this offense, Jordan Love, Matt LaFleur, who's the problem? And guess what? By the way, as much as I think Matt LaFleur is still a good coach and deserves to be around, if next year is an unmitigated nightmare at offense and this passing offense can't get going, you can get out of Matt LaFleur. You can't get out of Jordan Love. So guess what? Sorry, Matt, but you're probably going to be the odd man out in that situation because it's easier to find a new offensive guy and play caller and offensive mind than it is to find a new quarterback. So if things go very wrong, then yeah, you're probably looking at like some significant changes, or maybe Matt giving up play calling at that point in time to maybe save his skin at that point in time, whatever it might be. But yes, that changes the calculus quite a bit. If it plateaus and it's a very similar year in 2025 that we saw in 2024, maybe they win 10, 11 games, beat up on some bad teams, lose to the good teams, have a first round exit again. All right, now we're seeing something consistent, but we're plateauing. And why is that? Is it a Goody thing? Is it a Matt thing? Is it a Jordan thing? And then you have to make your determinations from there. If you bounce back, but it's the same as 2023, and now it's like, all right, well, 2023 was good, but kind of because there were no expectations. 2024 took a step back, and then 2025 took a step forward again, but only to the point where we saw them in 2023. They had some ups and downs during the season, won an awesome playoff game in the first round, won a heartbreaker in the second round. All right, now you're sort of back to where you were in 23. And again, probably some questions you have to answer, but probably buys you another year of evaluation. Or if they take a major step forward next year, they're top of the league, either, finish with 3 losses in the regular season, the number 1 seed, maybe you lose in the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl, or maybe you win it. Well, that certainly changes it. in a positive direction, or maybe you struggle in the regular season, but go on to win a Super Bowl or make an unbelievable run at the end of the year. That's a pretty significant step forward. And that's why I say for right now, you're not making any long-term determinations on Jordan or Matt right now. But the disappointment in 2024 opens up the doorway to question marks in 2025. Whereas if you had a really good year this year, then 2025, you have a bit more house money of like, you could take a step back and it'd be disappointing, but you had 2 really good years prior to that. So you're not super concerned about it. Now you have the bad taste of this year. And so now next year, the gateway of what could happen is much wider, meaning it could be great, it could be terrible, or anything in between. And how any of those things happen could really affect, ultimately what happens with Jordan and Matt and how the future progresses for this franchise. So I do think 2025 becomes a much more impactful and important season for everyone involved. So yeah, I think there's absolutely a truth to that. Give me 1 second here really quick, guys. Just have to check on something really quick. Sorry for the wait. Okay. All right. Give me 1 second to get back here. All right. Donald Lee, Andy, thanks for being a voice of reason all year. Donald, you are more than welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate you a ton. All right. You lost Rodgers, Devontae, and Bach, 3 Hall of Famers. You got nothing in return, a first and second, 2 seconds from those trades that have equaled basic players, and Good is praised. Why exactly? Well, the first thing I will say is, you're not getting anything in return for Bach, right? Because it's a devastating injury. For Devontae, you get a first and second round pick. The second round pick, you move up to get Christian Watson. The first round pick was Quay Walker. There's definitely, plus you get a bunch of free agent money that you can spend because you don't spend it on Devontae, which definitely helps. But the Quay and half of Watson has not been a good ROI in return for Devontae. Rodgers is a little bit different. Edgerrin Cooper is part of the return on Aaron Rodgers. So I think to say you got nothing in return is not fair when Edgerrin Cooper is a piece of that Aaron Rodgers trade, at least if I remember correctly. So I don't think I would go, relentlessly in that direction. What I will say is that how you're usually judged is how the team performs after you move on from a Hall of Fame quarterback. And so far, in 2 seasons after moving on from a Hall of Fame quarterback, you've put together back-to-back playoff seasons. Granted, 1 and 2 overall in your playoffs in those 2 years, but you didn't really see a setback. In fact, your last year with Aaron, you don't make the playoffs, and you trade him away, move forward, start with a new young quarterback, and it made it to back-to-back seasons to the playoffs with the youngest team in the NFL. Most people would point at that and say that's a pretty incredible outcome, all things considered. It's fair to criticize, and we have criticized some of the things today that have not gone according to plan and things that need to get better. But I still think if you look at it in totality, going from a Hall of Famer, moving on from Rodgers, Devontae, and Bakhtiari, and over the last 2 seasons without any of them going to the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, that still shows usually a pretty damn good foundation that you have under your feet, but clearly some cracks and some things that need to get remodeled in the offseason. Thanks, Andy. You're one of the best. Go Pack Go RCS. Thank you so much for that. 4th and 26. I missed. That was a competitive game. John, I almost am feeling the opposite coming out of this one to some slight extent. It was almost beautiful to at least not have a heartbreaking loss. I don't know that I can handle any more heartbreaking losses. Like that game, that NFC Championship game against Atlanta when they lost by like 1,000. There was almost like a beautiful mercy to that. There was almost a beautiful mercy to this of just like, all right, well, that was a complete, shit show, but at least I didn't have to have my heart ripped out of my chest. I could just have a nice, slow, painful death throughout the course of it. Very clearly seeing, the outcome in front of my eyes that they were not the better team in this game. There was something almost therapeutic about that rather than like, oh yeah, clearly they're the better team in this game. And oh, yep, some shitty thing happened at the end and now my heart's ripped out of my chest at the very last moment. Awesome. So there was almost something therapeutic for me about that. But yes, I do understand what you mean in that, there's a beautifulness to being actually competitive in playoff games as well. On the spot in order, put Andy Herman in the GM spot. What's our top 5 offseason to 2 list? PS, I hated the LVN pick when it happened. I didn't see what they saw even a little, and it showed all season. We went through the list already. C-Quiz, I think you asked this a little bit earlier. Sorry, I didn't get to it sooner. Listen, I understood the LVN pick. I really wanted Christian Gonzalez in that situation. I know what they saw. Listen, when you look at it from like a scouting eye standpoint, like LVN checks pretty much every single box that you're looking for. It's unfortunate he has not taken that step. I can understand some of the red flags that he had coming out as well. And I could understand why maybe some teams or some, couch GMs or couch scouts would maybe be like, hey, maybe that's not the guy. Maybe you should go with a Christian Gonzalez who looks like an all-pro corner coming out of college. But I do know what they saw. It just is unfortunate that he has not taken any legitimate step as a pass rusher in his first 2 seasons as a Green Bay Packer. Packers were narrowing the gap and looking the better team late for a short time, but then penalties and injuries destroyed everything. I think the defense hung in there, really gave Green Bay a puncher's chance. I think had there not been injuries, the offense would have looked better. Maybe they would have had a better chance to kind of pull away or not pull away, but like come back and have a real legitimate chance at winning this one. But I'll just go back to the point of I don't think that Green Bay got screwed in any major way in this one. Some calls that went against them for sure. Some injuries that went against them for sure. Philly to me definitely looked like the better team in this one. Gary seems to have hit his ceiling. Trade perhaps. I don't know that any team's going to want to give up anything significant for a player who has seemed to have hit his ceiling, has had a major injury as of late, has a massive contract, and didn't have that high-end impact on the season. Also, you have to be careful in the fact that if you trade away Rashawn Gary, despite the fact that he had a rough season, he is probably still your best natural pass rusher. Even if that's not ideal, you don't necessarily want to downgrade that position either. And again, what you would get in return would not be what you would be hoping for anyway, because if you can see it, Jordan, I can promise you every other GM can see it as well. And they are not going to want to give up anything significant for that type of player on that type of contract. So I do not see that being in the cards in any way. Sorry about that. Said you speculated wildly about a bad play call. We don't need to, get into it, Clive. If you want to shoot me an email, you can shoot me an email and I can unblock you. Name one thing Goot has done right. Ted Thompson handed him 12, 17, and 69, and he turned them into a bunch of mid-draft picks. He's traded Hall of Fame players into below-average draft picks. Goot has earned no grace. 69 is not his fault at all. You cannot fault him for a unbelievable knee injury, and it's not his fault he couldn't get anything in return for that. We went over Aaron. By the way, moving on from Aaron, he got Aaron as a Hall of Famer, and Aaron was a Hall of Famer in 2020, 2021. He put together 2 rosters that were very capable of winning a Super Bowl, in my opinion. The team didn't get the job done, and the Bakhtiari injury had a lot to do with that. The trade of Aaron Rodgers, the fact that he was able to get anything in return for that is actually a unbelievable deal for Goody, not to mention that Adrian Cooper is involved in that trade. And yes, you would have liked better ROI on Devontae Adams, but I will once again say that for a player that clearly wanted out and that was a free agent, getting a first and second round pick and saving a bunch of money and being able to utilize the money on that eventually for players like, that it opened up money eventually for players like Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs, not the worst outcome on that either. Plenty of criticisms to go around for Goody. Not getting anything of ROI for Bakhtiari is just complete BS. Because what are you supposed to do when the guy completely, his knee disintegrates into a million different pieces? And then getting what he got for Aaron is a masterclass in GMing. So yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that premise overall, but plenty that he needs to improve upon. Aggressive offseason from Groot, KC, Kansas City, Los Angeles Rams, Baltimore, Detroit, all super aggressive in the draft and trades. We can't always draft and develop our way out of roster holes. I am going to be very interested to see how Goody manages this offseason, to say the least. Skillen, thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. Thank you a ton. My apologies that I did not get to any of our regular chats. Actually, it looks like we didn't have any massive click here for $4.99 off of something or whatever. So that's a good sign. A lot of chats. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to everything. I wish I could get through every different question. We'll do some lives this week for sure. So if I didn't get to anything, my apologies. Thank you so much for all the support. I do have to get out of here because I do have a podcast I'm supposed to do coming up. I don't know. I know I was supposed to do with Tyler and Nathan. It looks like Tyler, unfortunately, is going to be unable to go. But I cannot thank you guys all enough. Thank you for a hell of a season. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for making Pack-A-Day what it is. I'm excited for the offseason. Stick around. I'm not saying this for me. Thank the people that you followed throughout the course of the season and continue to follow them in the offseason. Whether it's Cheesehead TV, Locked On Packers, Tom Grossi comedy, whether it's Packs What She Said, or whether it's any of the guys that are doing the beats you're covering on ESPN, Packers News, Pete Doherty, any of those guys, whether it's trying to think of, I'm sure I'm missing a million people. Obviously, all the amazing work over at Packer Report that a lot of us do, whether it's wherever. Support your channels in the off season. Make sure to thank you guys. It is a grind. It is a fun grind. It is a grind that I do not take for granted. It is a grind that I love every second of. I can tell you, especially over the last few weeks, as my body's starting to wear down and there's a lot of 4-hour night sleeps. And there's a lot of me being like, I would just love to be able to go to bed early. And there's like, it is a freaking grind. So I'm not saying this for me. I'm saying this for all the other people that do it at an incredibly high level. Follow them throughout the off season, subscribe to their channels, send them some super chats if you get a chance. If they have memberships available, go out and do that. I can just speak for myself. Like I said, it's a beautiful thing. I love every second of it, but there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it. It may not always look like it. It may not always seem like it, but like I said, there is a lot of 14, 15, 16-hour days. There's a lot of film study. There's a lot of research. There's a lot of looking at analytics. There's a lot of talking. There's a lot of answering questions. There's a lot of blocking Clive on Twitter. There's a lot of all of that stuff. So I cannot thank you enough for all of your support. And as I want to say one more time, it is not a mandatory thing or a required thing that you do a super chat or that you are a member or that anything like that. I appreciate everyone's support. I know that everyone's in a little bit of a different spot, and just being here and showing up and asking a question or whatever, that's always more than enough. I'm everyone that is any part of Pack-A-Day. I love you guys all equally. There's no monetary difference. But thank you so much for everything. Thank you for an awesome season. We have a awesome off season to get to everything. It's going to be fun having the draft in Green Bay. It's going to be a fun offseason with Green Bay having money to spend. Obviously, another important draft for the Packers as well. A lot of decisions that'll need to be made. And of course, I can promise you that we will cover it to the very best of our ability here on the Pack-A-Day podcast. RCS, thank you so much for the final super chat there. And Joseph, you are more than welcome as well. I love you all. Enjoy your night, everyone. Don't get too frustrated. Don't let the highs get too high. Don't let the lows get too lows. I promise you, we don't need to fire everyone. Angelic, thank you so much for that. I will see you all very soon. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.